Time to wake up. It's Saturday morning. Find some milk and cereal. Grab a bowl and spoon. No, a bigger spoon. Head to the living room and take a seat on the floor while Joseph and Chris present to you Saturday Morning Cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Saturday Morning Cartoon Boom. This is a show where we plop down on the living room floor with a big bowl of cereal and watch all your favorite cartoons, both old and new. I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
And today, we watched Avatar: The Last Airbender, and not the crappy movie.
Ugh, let's not even talk about that little stain on our history. No thanks. Ugh.
Gross.
Alright, so we are going to change one thing about the show real quick, and we'll let you know now, because it'll come into play at the end, but we're going to change up our rating system a little bit. We've been doing 3 out of 3, but we feel like that's not enough range to rate some of these shows, because some of them, they don't deserve to be so close together.
Yeah.
In retrospect, like Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling, it needs to be much farther away than a show like Our Real Monsters or, you know, something else like that. So we're going to do 5 bowls of cereal in our rating now instead of the 3.
It just makes more sense. So this show aired from 2005 to 2008, created by Michael DiMartino and Brian Konietzko. It ran for 3 seasons, 61 episodes on Nickelodeon, and for a short synopsis, in a war-torn world of elemental magic, a young boy reawakens to undertake a dangerous mystic quest to fulfill his destiny as the Avatar. Accurate?
Pretty accurate, yeah. There's way more to it, and we'll get into that, but yeah, pretty accurate.
So Chris, who are some notable actors from this show?
Well, our main character, Aang, is voiced by Zach Tyler. One of the other main characters, Katara, voiced by Mae Whitman, which people might remember from the TV show Arrested Development, or you might have seen in Scott Pilgrim vs. the World as Roxy. Sokka is voiced by Jack DeCina? I'm guessing that's how you say it, DeCina. Prince Zuko, voiced by Dante Bosco. Rufio from Hook, if anyone remembers Hook, because Rufio's a bad character.
How could you forget Rufio? Come on.
Rufio! He also is in the sequel to this show, The Legend of Korra. He returns as a different character as a descendant of the character he's voicing now. So that's pretty cool that they brought him back. His uncle, I think it was Iroh. I'm going to go with Iroh. Voiced by Mako Iwamatsu. Those are pretty much the main characters that we're going to see throughout the entire show.
So let's milk bin a few fun little marshmallows into our bowl of Avatar cereal.
Nice.
The creator, Michael DiMartino, left Family Guy in 1999 to actually work on Avatar, so wise decision on his part. The 4 Chinese characters above the title translated to the divine medium who had descended upon the mortal world. Pretty accurate.
Yeah, that's actually really cool.
Yeah, and then almost all the animals in the show are a combination of 2 animals, like Appa is a half bison, half manatee, Momo is a half bat, half lemur, and then those little penguins are like half penguins, half cats or something. I don't know what they are.
You know, they remind me of Pokemon in a way, in that they're kind of like variations on animals from our world.
Yeah.
And there is one, it's not a character in the show, but it shows up in one particular episode that I love, and it's a cross between, I think, a lion and a moose. And I absolutely loved it, and I'll get into that as we hit that episode.
Oh, that one was like a saber-toothed tiger and a
moose.
It
was a saber-toothed tiger and a moose. That's
yeah,
right.
I remember seeing that one. So, Chris, what memories do you have of this show?
Well, I watched this show for the first time, I think about 3 or 4 years ago. And it was because I was working with a kid that was super into it, and I really hadn't given it much time. He was really into this and Naruto, and he's like, if you're going to watch one, just give Avatar a try, see if you like it. So I'm like, okay, I can try it out. I watched the first episode and wasn't paying that much attention to it, and was kind of like, didn't pay that much attention, didn't watch anything after that. And a few months later, I'm like, I'm going to give it another shot, and I was hooked. And I blew through all 3 seasons, probably within a few weeks, because it was on Netflix for a short time, and oh my god, absolutely loved it. Loved this show. Like,
nice. Everything
about it. Such a rich world, all the martial arts, and the element-based cultures. I love things based around elements, which is kind of probably a weird thing, but like,
no,
visual...
I know what you mean exactly.
Right. visual styles and just the way they reimagined these cultures based around these four elements. It's really, really cool to me. So it just appeals to me in every way. So I was really happy that this got suggested to us by @WriterSean on Twitter. So thank you so much for recommending this, and anyone else, if you have a cartoon, definitely hit us up on Twitter and let us know, because this is exactly what I was hoping for, and I was really excited we got to watch this. And I know that you hadn't seen this before. What things did you know about this show before coming into it and watching it? Any preconceived notions or anything?
First, I'll touch on what you were just talking about, thanking Sean for recommending this to us. So anybody who wants to push these cartoons on us, please do, because we love watching them. And my memories of this show are really only based on seeing the merchandise all around me at that time. Even still, to this day, I'll see various merchandise, but it meant nothing to me because I had not watched the show. I didn't have a kid push it on me like you did, so I had no one to really tell me, like, you have to watch this. It was hearsay, and I had heard it was good, but it wasn't enough to entice me to actually watch it. This kind of forced me to watch it. Actually, I'm very, very glad that we did. I'm not sure why I didn't watch it during its initial run, because it's something that's kind of right up my alley as far as what I do enjoy about cartoons. But man, am I glad I finally did.
Yay.
For anyone not familiar with the format, we watched the first episode, the highest rated episode, and then finally a random or listener chosen episode, in this case, the one chosen by @WriterSean on Twitter. We'll start with our very first episode, which was Boy in the Iceberg, Season 1, Episode 1. Short description: two teenage siblings, Sokka and Katara, living in the South Pole, discover a very strange boy, Aang, along with his flying pet bison, Appa, in an iceberg. But can they trust him when he accidentally draws the war to their village's doorstep? One thing just to note real quick is I liked the way, and what was really funny is we actually watched an episode just out of coincidence from each season. We watched one from Season 1, Season 2, and Season 3. And what I noticed was the titles, the season titles are like Book 1, Water, and then they're just titled by the element, and they're called books instead of seasons or chapters or anything like that.
Right.
So I thought that was
awesome. That's so cool. Like, it gives it, I don't know how to describe it. Like, it gives it more authenticity, kind of. Like, it makes it feel more in line with that world, calling it a book rather than a DVD or a season or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. It makes it feel, right, like more like part of this Avatar universe that we're introduced to.
Absolutely.
So the intro talked about what this episode is really kind of revolving around. There's harmony in this world between the elements, between water, fire, earth, and air, until the Fire Nation disrupts this harmony and kind of throws them into war.
Right, so just everything's kind of in discord. All the other tribes are nervous about what the Fire Nation's gonna do. So we start out seeing this smaller village of people from like the Water Tribe. It's not like a big group. This tribe's like in the south. The larger tribe is supposed to be more in the north. So they're pretty separated from the rest of their kind of people. But they're in a small like fishing village, and we start out seeing Katara and her brother Sokka. Basically, they're fishing. They're trying to get fish for their village. And Katara is very like kind of adventurous. You know, she's kind of not satisfied with where she is because she is a waterbender. So basically that means that she has some control over water. She can manipulate water to do what she wants. But she's not an expert, but she's the only waterbender in her tribe. So she feels like she could do more, but there's no one to really guide her. So she's kind of restless.
Yeah, she doesn't have a master. She doesn't have a trainer to really help her fulfill her destiny.
Right. And then we got her brother, Sokka, who's kind of a know-it-all, kind of a dimwit, but everything he does, he's trying to provide for the tribe. He's trying to protect his sister, but he's kind of a buffoon, and he does not have any waterbending ability.
Yeah, he's just kind of the tribe's warrior, I guess. He
by default, I think.
By default, yeah, exactly. He's like the oldest, one of the oldest males in this community, but he really serves as kind of the comic relief of this show in parts.
Absolutely, yeah.
Especially when some of the episodes get kind of heavy. Even though I only watched 3, I could already tell, like, he's always levity in these heavy situations.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I do like about this show is there is a lot of comedy and stuff, but there's also, like, it gets intense. There's some really intense, emotional, heavy subjects. He's a great character to keep around in the main fold because, yeah, you need that character to bring that goofiness back. Otherwise, it's just going to get too dark for kids, which this show is aimed at, but, I mean, it appeals to everybody, honestly.
Yeah. Like the intro was talking about Sokka and Katara find this iceberg while they're fishing, while they're really kind of arguing. They find this iceberg and then open it because they see a young boy in there and they see that he's still alive. So they free him from it. And it ends up being Aang, who has this large blue arrow tattoo going from basically head to toe.
They seem kind of shocked because we're not really clued in on all of this yet, but I mean, it comes up that they've never seen an airbender because the airbenders really don't even exist anymore. They were wiped out by the Fire Nation. So everyone's just like, there's an airbender? Like, this is really weird. And that kind of sends some red flags to people as Aang meets them. They're kind of like, okay, that's kind of weird. This shouldn't happen.
This flash goes in the air, and then it also alerts who at the time is an antagonist, Prince Zuko, who is prince of the Fire Nation. We come to find out in this episode that Aang has been displaced in time and trying to save himself and Appa, his bison manatee flying thing. He freezes them in an iceberg, and he stays frozen in cryogenesis for 100 years. And we find that out all in this episode, actually.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, like, we're basically getting introduced to what's happened over the past 100 years about the Fire Nation betraying everybody. We're finding out that the airbenders are really not even around anymore, and that the Avatar, who is this embodiment of all 4 basic elements of magic that they have in this universe, disappeared 100 years ago, around the time that Aang trapped himself in an iceberg. So the Avatar is basically supposed to be a defender of the world, and that he can master all 4 elements so that he can be the check and balance for each tribe. So if the Fire Nation steps up like they did and they're starting to take things too far, it's supposed to be Aang's job to kind of take them down a notch and settle things. But we find out that instead he ran and he hid and basically froze himself for 100 years.
Unknowingly, though, he even said himself that he thought he'd only been asleep or in that iceberg for maybe a couple days or hours or something even.
Right, so he had no idea.
That kind of wraps this episode up. It's really an introductory episode to the characters and really what's going on in this world. We hear that the Avatar is needed. There's supposed to be an Avatar every century, and this Avatar has been lost. So the quest is, from this point, just to subdue the Fire Nation and locate this Avatar.
I do want to mention, too, is that we briefly mentioned Prince Zuko, who is the Prince of the Fire Nation, and his quest is basically, he's brought shame and dishonor to his father, and his face is scarred from a really bad burn, and his uncle is basically kind of there with him, sort of guiding him, trying to, I don't know, like, Zuko is very hell-bent on finding the Avatar, almost to the point of obsession. He's just taking things too far. He's kind of losing his mind a little bit. He's too aggressive, and Iroh is really trying to curve that in as subtle way as possible, but trying to also teach him how to control fire at the same time and give him more patience and give him more wisdom, I guess. He's trying to impart wisdom on Zuko before he makes too many mistakes.
Yeah, so I liked this episode a lot, actually. It was a great introductory episode. I think it really told you all it needed to tell you and definitely caught my interest from the start.
It was very good. And he got to sled on some penguins, which was fun.
Oh, true, yeah. He got to do penguin sledding.
Aang sled on some penguins. We're going to do things a little different this episode because we usually do the highest rated episode next and then the listener pick after. But this time it worked out so where the highest rated episode is actually the very last episode of the entire series. So we're going to do that one last instead.
Yep.
So our next episode is going to be our listener pick.
The next episode recommended by @WriterSean from Twitter is Bitter Work from Season 2, Episode 9. Aang begins to learn earthbending from Toph. Uncle Iroh resumes teaching Zuko firebending to better prepare him for facing Azula and reveals a new technique he learned from watching waterbenders.
I didn't remember, just from the name of the episode, I didn't remember what it was. But as soon as I started, I remembered, and I'm really glad that Sean picked this one because this is a good episode. Because there's some really funny stuff and there's some very serious emotional things all happening at the same time in this. So this episode was what I would say is kind of like the perfect, well-balanced episode of this show to give you a little taste of everything. So great pick.
Yeah, definitely. And I agree with you. Even though this was only the second episode that I actually watched, it still gave a good mixture of things. The essential plot of it is teaching Aang how to use earthbending. Toph is a young girl who is blind, but she essentially sees through the feeling of the earth around her.
Right, so she's kind of like Daredevil in a way.
Yeah, in a sense. For a little girl, she's also a very tough teacher.
Oh my gosh.
Whereas Katara is a benevolent teacher who uses positive reinforcement, Toph is just like a drill sergeant.
Toph is hardcore. She takes no pity on Aang as she's trying to teach him, and she gives no quarter. He's either going to do it or he's going to fail. It's very much, there is no try, there is do.
Yeah, do or do,
or do not.
Yeah. And you know what? That was actually really interesting, though, because it made a lot of sense when it related to the Earth as a bending ability,
right?
Where it's just unmoving. Steadfastness, unmoving, literally and figuratively. So to see that in this character, that they, even such a young, kind of presumably weak girl, has all of this power and just drive to her.
Yeah, she is hardcore. And she also appears in the sequel, Legend of Korra, and is just as awesome. So
nice.
Something to look forward to if anyone hasn't seen it yet. It's great. One thing about this episode that I absolutely loved is there's a really interesting juxtaposition between Aang learning earthbending and also does some waterbending and stuff too. Like Katara is also teaching him some more waterbending techniques. On the other side, we have Prince. Well, he's not even really the prince anymore because I think at this point he was pretty much like kind of on the run in a way. So Prince Zuko had a major transformation personality-wise. He's taking care of his uncle Iroh rather than bossing him around and being an overall jerk like we saw him in the first episode. So here he's definitely loosened up. He's much kinder. We also get to see some introspective on Iroh because he's dreaming of his dead son the first time we see him in this episode, and he awakes and then he's seeing his nephew, and it's like you get that feeling that he's doing his best to try to take that love he can't give his son anymore, and he's trying to impart it all on Zuko.
Yeah.
It was just a really, really cool thing to see, and it was a really heavy thing to start this episode out with. It makes you appreciate both of those characters even more seeing that.
Yeah, like you were saying, this is really a big change in Zuko's character from the first episode and presumably the first season, even though I didn't watch all of that. Whereas he's an antagonist just through and through on the first episode, here he's more of an anti-hero. He's leaning towards the side of good versus just being pure dark side. So I like this a lot, and I really like the scene where Uncle teaches him to use sort of a water bending ability in order to absorb the lightning. He refuses to cast it on him because he's like, no, lightning is dangerous. Like, are you serious? I'm not going to shoot lightning at you. So he goes on his own into a raging storm, and the way he's sitting there trying to be struck by it, telling it that it's never held back before and to strike him, like, that was really strong. That was where the emotion really came into this episode.
Oh yeah, that was a really intense scene. You're seeing all the frustrations that he has come out at once, and that he's literally screaming at this storm to hit him with lightning. He's like screaming, he's crying at the same time. Like the very end, you see tears going down his face as the rain's like pouring against him. He's not afraid to, because I mean, his uncle warned him like this could kill him. If he gets struck at lightning and messes up this move, he'll die.
Right.
And he is obviously not afraid of it. You almost get the feeling he almost kind of has a death wish in a way.
At that point, it's almost like he's got nothing left to live for. So he wants to become stronger, but at what cost, really?
Exactly. On the other hand, while that's going on, we have some really funny moments with Aang and Toph as Aang's trying to learn, and some really, really funny stuff with, like we said, Sokka is kind of the comic relief of this show, and he has some of the funniest moments of the entire show in this episode where he goes hunting and he finds this little cub of, it's a... Oh man, what did they name this thing? Saber-toothed moose lion is what they called this animal. But I don't think he knew what it was at the time. It was just this tiny little creature. And he's like, I can take this thing down. And this is one of my favorite quotes ever. He's talking to this cub as he's going to try to hunt it and, kill it for food. And he says, you're awfully cute, but unfortunately for you, you're made of meat. So he tries to jump on this thing and he fails and he ends up like falling into the ground. and he gets trapped.
Yeah.
So, like, it's just like his
the
head
whole episode.
and his chest, like part of his torso, but his arms are trapped against him, so he can't reach for anything, and he's stuck there, just basically waiting for someone to find him. And at one point, it switches, back to some of the others, and we go back to a scene with him and this little cub again, and the cub's sleeping on top of his head, which is just, oh man, it was just so funny.
I like where the cub brought him an apple and rolled it kind of close to him, but not all the way. So
he still couldn't reach it.
He still couldn't reach, yeah. That was good because really, I mean, he was the comic relief of this whole episode because his entire portion of it was him being stuck in the ground and just interacting with that cub. So it was just those two characters, really not even the cub interacting so much because it can't speak or really understand what he's saying. It's just there and it's doing its own thing while he's holding a dialogue with this cub.
And he ends up giving it a name, which is Foo Cuddly Poops.
Oh, yeah. Which is a great name.
Right. So eventually he gets found, but it's after Aang feels like he's failed Toph because he started learning some things, but then he kind of failed this one test because he was afraid. She shoves this giant boulder at him. He's supposed to stand his ground and just stop it. He gets scared, jumps out of the way. Toph basically rips him a new one, and Aang just kind of is like really just down on himself. He's not feeling confident. I gotta get out of here. And he ends up he finds Katara, who says that her brother's missing, and then they eventually find him as this giant saber-toothed moose lion shows up to defend her cub. This thing is huge.
Oh, yeah.
So Sokka's pretty much unless he can be saved. So
so this is where it really comes in. It's actually a good way to push the plot because Aang comes in, and the only way he's really able to do this is by utilizing his powers, standing his ground against this fearsome beast, I think is how Toph puts it. But this is his way to finally tap into the steadfastness that he needed to learn this earth power.
Exactly. He defeats the crazy big beast thing. He has done enough to impress Toph. He decides that, okay, I better get Sokka out of the ground now, and he's going to use the earthbending to do it, because now he's feeling more confident. And Toph's immediately like, no, you'll probably kill him.
Yeah.
So she does it
I'll do it. You'll probably kill him, right?
It's pretty good. Yeah, it was a great episode. There's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of humor, and there's a lot of emotion. I love Uncle Iroh so much. He's one of my favorite characters from this whole thing. One of my favorite things is that he's always drinking tea. And one of those things that, as he's explaining this stuff to Zuko, he's drinking tea and stuff like that and talking about how tea calms you. And Zuko's like, oh, so like this is to calm me so I can learn this stuff. And Iroh's just like, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. That's
sure.
why. Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah, he's good. He's just so relaxed and kind of takes everything in stride. He's so much at ease. He is a great juxtaposition to Zuko's really intense, focused character.
It's good. He's like, I can honestly say he is my favorite from this show.
So good and very talented. He is master of fire bending. So that's a good time to jump to our next episode, which is going to be the highest rated episode in this case, and coincidentally also the very last episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender, Sozen's Comet, Part 4, Avatar Aang, Season 3, Episode 21. So that's a very long way for me to title that, but it is accurate because this is the fourth part in the finality of this show. Aang's moment of truth arrives. Can he defeat Ozai, the Phoenix King? Will he be forced to take a human life? All the characters face their greatest challenges.
Just to get this out of the way, Ozai is voiced by Mark Hamill, which is super awesome.
Oh, yeah. And I would have had no idea.
Oh, I know. It's just crazy. And did such a good job. And, like, that's one thing I do want to point out is that the voice acting in the show is phenomenal. Everyone is really good. And there's a person in particular that I was super impressed with, especially in this episode, but I'll get to that once we get to that part. But to just give you some background, what's happening in this episode is everything has come to a head. It's an all-out war against the Fire Nation. The other nations are kind of banded together. They're battling the Fire Nation. There's literally stuff going on all over the place. There's fighting on the ground, there's fighting by sea, there's fighting in the air. The first thing we see, and this is kind of impressive, we see Toph and Sokka taking down some of these airships from the Fire Nation, and for the first time, really, like, Sokka's got some moves. He took some people down. I was pretty impressed, honestly. I mean, he was still goofy and screwing some things up, but he was able to take some dudes down.
Yeah, and this is also, at least for me, my intro to metal bending bending, which is apparently something that Toph created.
Yeah, she developed it herself. I think she's supposed to be the first metal bender. And it makes sense because metal is part of the earth. But yeah, she was just ripping these ships apart with her bare hands.
Yeah, it was pretty
so
awesome.
Cool.
This was such an intense episode, so much action in it. And it makes sense because it's the end of this war, so it has to come to an end with this large, grand battle. And it really did.
I forgot just how crazy everything gets at the end of the show because, like, yeah, it's all out war. I mean, everybody is fighting. There's not a single person that isn't right smack dab in the middle of everything going on.
Yeah, and I don't know when it was realized that when Aang actually started being taught all of these abilities, but Aang is the future avatar. He is the current avatar, but needs to be trained in the rest of these bending arts. And the compilation of all of this will make him the avatar, the master of all four. And here we see him, from the previous episode, we see what happened previously, where it's showing him being beaten down completely by Ozai. And he's about to be defeated, but then the spirits of the previous avatars come out and basically tell him, you need to kill Ozai. Like, this is the only way. You need to take him out. So they infuse him with their abilities, which is also all of the abilities of air, fire, water, and earth. And this scene is just incredible. Just watching this actually happen, watching his transformation occur, where his eyes are glowing white, even his arrows glowing white, and he is just this giant ball of destruction. And that was amazing to look at.
Yeah, it was so crazy. It's like he's possessed, basically.
Yeah.
He's got fire coming out of his eyes and his mouth. He's got it, like, swirling around him. He's got, like, a tiny little tornado ball going around him. He has water coming up. Rock is breaking up from the ground and surrounding him, and all of it's flowing around him. And he basically, like, up until that point, Ozai's beating the snot out of him, and he just unleashes everything. Aang becomes the epitome of, like, a god's wrath at this point. It's honestly scary how intense he gets. It's just, like, you wouldn't believe that he has it in him to become what he becomes, and it's just mind-boggling when it happens.
It just, all this that's infused in him, it just made him this unstoppable force, and Ozai can't even touch him at this point. So while the prior 3 episodes to this finality might have been either evenly matched or it was really just pushing for Ozai, then it just turns into Aang completely overbearing him and becoming this force that Ozai can't even touch. There's nothing he can do. It comes down to, will Aang kill Ozai or not?
So while this is taking place, we see some of the others kind of in their own battles. Like we said, Sokka and Toph were fighting the airships. Sokka, he breaks his leg while he's up there or something because he gets injured. They fall from it, but they end up getting saved. Kitara and Zuko's been injured by his sister, Azula, and I love Azula just because she is nuts. She's been around since the 2nd season. We didn't get to see her in the episode we watched, but when he was taking care of his uncle in that episode we saw, it was because Azula had just beat the crap out of him, basically, and injured them both. So Azula is powerful enough to take her brother and to injure her uncle, who is a master of firebending. She can use lightning techniques. That was, like, the whole reason for that episode where he's trying to learn all the lightning and stuff like that, to be able to face off against his sister because she wiped the floor with him. And here we see that Zuko's down. It's Kitara is the only person that can face off against her right now.
And the way that she does it is wonderful. She wraps Azula in this bubble. Well, first it's ice because she is a master of water at this point. And then she melts the ice around her, cuffs Azula to where she can't use her bending powers anymore. And watching the aftermath of it is awesome, where Azula is so furious that she's crying, she's screaming, and just breathing fire. And that was just so crazy to watch.
Yeah, that is one of my favorite moments of the entire show. And it's funny because, like, this was the part I was talking about where I was really impressed with the acting, the voice acting and stuff here with the woman that played Azula, because, man, she brought it. You can tell, like, this lady's just absolutely crazy, but you feel for her. You can tell, like, she's just been so brainwashed and mentally just broken and tortured from her own father. Like you said, she's screaming and crying at the same time and laughing and fire shooting out of her mouth. she's just completely broken and doesn't know, like, her emotions can't even cope with it. She's hitting all these emotions at once. Her own body doesn't even know what to do anymore. The end of this episode, we're not going to tell you what happens at the end, just that it comes down to, is Aang going to kill Ozai? He's got the opportunity. What's going to happen? We'll leave it at that. You got to watch it. I mean, there's plenty more to it, and it was a great way to end this show. The whole ending's just amazing.
If what we've talked about already doesn't entice you to watch this show, then what's wrong with you? Come on, watch this show. It's amazing. Literally.
It's too good not to watch. You have to watch it.
Yeah, the ending wraps it up perfectly. The beginning starts it off perfectly. The ending wraps it up perfectly. It's just a wonderful sandwich of a show, so check it out for real. Well, Chris, I think it's about time we awaken our inner kids from their 30-year slumber to see what they thought of this show.
All right, let me pull my inner kid out of my iceberg here.
This cartoon is the best, and it's so cool because the Avatar has all these powers, and he can fly, and there's flying bison, and all these ninja moves, like, bah, bah, bah. And I want to live in a world like this one, and I could be the next Avatar, because I could totally bend things. I love everything about this cartoon, and I rated it 5 spoon-bending bowls of cereal out of 5. And now, Joseph, it's your turn.
Very valid points, Christopher. I appreciate the handoff. As for me, I was incredibly intrigued from the start. Even though we only took in a very small percentage of the 61-episode journey, I found the characters both layered and compelling, the various Chinese martial arts styles blended flawlessly into this animated world, and the overarching journey to be excellent both in concept and execution. My energy was definitely bent by this show in the best possible way, so I have no hesitation giving it 5 big bowls of cereal out of 5, and I highly recommend it.
Nice job, little guys. You'll be an Avatar yet.
Yes, well said, children, as always. Well, listeners, it looks like our milk supply has now run dry, so it's time for us to say goodbye. And next week, we'll be watching
Shin-Chan, submitted via Twitter by @BDHWorkshop from our friend Sarah. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. And once again, I'm Joseph.
And I'm Chris.
And we'll see you next Saturday. Thanks everyone for listening. If you like what you heard, please give us a 5-star rating on iTunes. Definitely reach out and let us know what cartoon you'd like us to cover, along with some of your favorite episodes so we can feature them on our show.
You can make a request, see the current request list, or speak with the show host by visiting the Cartoon Boom subreddit. You can also connect with our network by visiting nerdsloth.com or searching for Nerdsloth on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. See you next Saturday.